Alex thought his life was perfect, a thriving career, a beautiful home, and a loving family. But when a cryptic text on his wife Emma's phone shatters that illusion, Alex uncovers a web of deceit that pushes him to the edge. Determined to protect his son and reclaim his dignity, Alex meticulously plans his revenge, exposing Emma's affair and unraveling her lies. But as the battle for truth and custody intensifies, neither Alex nor Emma anticipate the devastating consequences of their choices. In a gripping tale of betrayal, justice, and unintended tragedy, Alex learns that even the best-laid plans can lead to heartbreak when love and revenge collide. The haunting conclusion will leave you questioning where the line between victory and loss truly lies. I always thought my life was a picture-perfect success story. My name's Alex, 39, CEO of a mid-sized tech company, married for 11 years to Emma, a captivating woman who always knew how to command attention. Together, we had a son, Toby, a bright-eyed 8-year-old who adored dinosaurs and building Lego cities. From the outside, we had it all, a stunning suburban home with a wraparound porch, vacations in the Mediterranean, and a circle of friends that most would envy. Emma was everything I ever wanted, graceful, intelligent, with a charisma that could light up any room. She had this way of making people feel like the only ones that mattered. For me, she was my rock, or so I thought. It started subtly. At first, I barely noticed the signs, chalking them up to the stresses of life. Late-night text messages that she shrugged off with vague explanations. Sudden work trips she'd never mentioned before. And then there was the way she seemed distant, even when we were in the same room. It was like the vibrant, vivacious woman I married had turned into a stranger overnight. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was nothing. But the turning point came one evening when Toby, ever observant, tugged at my sleeve while I was clearing the dinner table. "Why doesn't Mommy tuck me in anymore?" he asked, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur, Rexy. "She's just busy, buddy," I said, forcing a smile. The weight of his innocent question hit me harder than I expected. Emma was slipping away, and it wasn't just me who noticed. But what could I do? How do you confront the person you've trusted with your entire life about suspicions you can barely articulate? Then, one Wednesday evening, everything changed. Emma had left for one of her work dinners. I was cleaning up after Toby's bedtime routine when her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I wasn't one to pry, but something about that moment felt different, almost like fate was nudging me toward the truth. The screen lit up with a message: "Can't wait for our weekend, gorgeous. E." My hand froze mid-reach. For a moment, I hoped I had misread it. Maybe it was a work joke, an inside reference. But the sinking feeling in my stomach told me otherwise. I didn't open the phone. Instead, I put it down as calmly as I could, my mind racing. Who the hell was E? And what weekend were they talking about? When Emma came home that night, I kept my composure. She walked through the door, her smile bright but her movements distracted. "How was Toby?" she asked, tossing her bag onto the sofa. "He's good. He missed you," I replied, studying her face. She didn't meet my eyes as she headed toward the kitchen to pour herself a glass of wine. My pulse quickened, but I said nothing. I needed more than a gut feeling to confront her. Over the next few days, I became an investigator in my own home. Emma's behaviors, which I had once ignored, now screamed at me. The late nights, the mysterious calls, the sudden obsession with her appearance, all of it added up. But I still lacked proof. One night, after she'd fallen asleep, I unlocked her phone using the passcode I'd memorized long ago. My heart pounded as I scrolled through her messages. Most of them were innocuous, conversations with friends and coworkers. But then I found a thread with someone saved simply as E. The messages were worse than I could have imagined. Flirtatious, intimate, peppered with inside jokes and plans for secret getaways. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I couldn't read any more. Instead, I took screenshots, saved them to a folder, and locked the phone before returning it to her nightstand. As I lay awake next to her that night, my mind whirled. How had we come to this? But anger soon replaced my devastation. Anger at her for betraying me, at myself for not seeing it sooner, and at the life we built, now teetering on a foundation of lies. By morning, I had decided, this wasn't going to end with me as the broken victim. The next day, I contacted a private investigator. I need concrete proof, I told him over the phone. Dates, places, photos, everything. The man on the other end didn't seem surprised. I'll get you what you need, he said. This isn't my first rodeo. While the PI worked, I began my own preparations. Financial records were scrutinized, our accounts reviewed, and legal consultations quietly arranged. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Emma had been hiding much more than an affair. There were unaccounted for expenses, unexplained trips, and even a secret savings account in her name. When the investigator finally delivered his report, it was worse than I had anticipated. The photographs alone were damning, Emma and a man named Eric, walking hand in hand into a luxury hotel. Dinner receipts, timestamps, and even surveillance footage left no room for doubt. I wasn't heartbroken anymore, I was furious. This wasn't just a betrayal of me, it was a betrayal of Toby, of everything we had worked so hard to build. But I wouldn't confront her yet. Not until I had every piece of the puzzle in place. The storm broke on a Saturday morning. Emma was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she made coffee. I stood in the doorway, watching her, my chest tightening with a mixture of anger and anticipation. Today, there would be no hiding, no pretending. I was done with the lies. "Morning," she said cheerfully when she saw me. She always had a way of brightening a room, even now, when I knew the truth. That charm was part of what made this so infuriating. "Morning," I replied, keeping my tone neutral as I sat at the table. Toby patted in, rubbing his eyes and mumbling about dinosaurs. I ruffled his hair and helped him pour cereal. Emma handed me a coffee, her smile as radiant as ever. It was almost nauseating. "I'm heading to yoga later," she said. "Then I might stop by the farmer's market. Want me to pick up anything?" I stared at her, trying to find some hint of guilt in her expression. There was none. "No," I said flatly. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered slightly. "What about?" I motioned toward the living room. "After Toby's done with breakfast." She glanced at him, then back at me. "Okay. Sure." The minutes crawled by as I waited for Toby to finish his cereal and settle into his favorite spot on the couch with his Legos. Once he was engrossed, I gestured for Emma to follow me into the den. She folded her arms as she sat on the love seat, her brow furrowing. "What's going on?" I closed the door behind me, took a deep breath, and began. "Emma, I know about Eric." The color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it, but then her shoulders sagged. "I was going to tell you," she said softly. "Tell me what?" "That you've been sneaking around for over a year. That you've been lying to me and Toby while playing house with someone else." Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. "Not this time. Alex, Don't," I snapped, cutting her off. "Don't insult me with excuses. I have everything, texts, photos, receipts. Do you have any idea how humiliating it's been to uncover this?" She looked away, biting her lip. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't plan this." "Didn't plan it?" I laughed bitterly. "You planned every lie, every trip, every excuse. Don't sit there and act like it just happened." She wiped her eyes, her voice trembling. "I was lonely, Alex. You're always working. Always busy. I needed someone who made me feel seen. I clenched my fists, willing myself to stay calm. That's your justification. You felt neglected, so you cheated. You didn't think to talk to me, to try to fix things. Her silence was deafening. I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. You destroyed everything, Emma. Not just our marriage, but our family. Tears streamed down her face now, but I didn't care. She could cry all she wanted, it wouldn't undo the damage. What do you want me to do? She asked finally. I stood and crossed the room, pulling a folder from my briefcase. You're going to sign these, I said, tossing the divorce papers onto the coffee table. Her eyes widened as she looked at them. You're divorcing me? What did you expect, Emma? For me to just forgive and forget? To let you keep living this double life while I play the fool? She stared at the papers, her hands shaking. What about Toby? I'm fighting for full custody, I said, my voice cold. He deserves better than this mess you've created. Her head snapped up. You can't do that. I'm his mother. And I'm his father, I shot back. The one who's been here, present, while you've been off, finding yourself, with Eric. You don't get to play the victim now. For a moment, it looked like she might argue, but then she slumped back into the couch, defeated. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she whispered. Yet here we are, I said. And let me make one thing clear, this isn't about revenge. It's about doing what's best for Toby. The room was silent except for the sound of her soft sobs. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me at the door. Alex, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. So am I said, without looking back. That afternoon, I took Toby to the park. Watching him laugh and play with the other kids, I felt a bittersweet pang. He had no idea how much his world was about to change. But as I watched him build sandcastles and chase butterflies, I promised myself one thing, no matter what, I would protect him from the fallout. Back home, Emma was gone. A hastily scrawled note on the kitchen counter read, needed some air. Be back later. I didn't care where she went. My focus was on ensuring that Toby and I came out of this stronger. The first domino had fallen, and there was no turning back. The days after our confrontation felt like walking through a battlefield, with unexploded mines hidden beneath every step. Emma had retreated into herself, alternating between silence and tears whenever we were in the same room. I tried to avoid her as much as possible, focusing instead on preparing for the legal storm that was about to unfold. Toby, blissfully unaware, continued to fill the house with the sounds of his adventures. He transformed the living room into a Jurassic jungle, complete with roaring dinosaur toys and cardboard mountains. Watching him play was my anchor, keeping me from drowning in the tidal wave of emotions and logistics that threatened to overwhelm me. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. On Tuesday, Emma called in sick to work, a rarity for her, and spent the day holed up in our bedroom. I gave her space, knowing any interaction would devolve into more tears or accusations. Instead, I made a call to our attorney, confirming the next steps in the divorce process. We'll file officially by the end of the week, my lawyer said, her voice calm and professional. Have you discussed custody arrangements? I want full custody, I said without hesitation. Emma can have visitation, but Toby's staying with me. She paused, and I could almost hear her weighing her words. Alex, it's not impossible, but full custody is rare unless there's proof she's unfit. Infidelity alone doesn't usually sway custody cases. I felt a surge of frustration but held it back. She's been neglecting him, I argued. And this affair shows she's putting herself above her family. We can use that, she said. But be prepared for a fight. Family courts prioritize co-parenting whenever possible. I thanked her and hung up, my resolve hardening. If Emma wanted a fight, I was ready. That evening, Emma emerged from the bedroom, her eyes red and puffy. "We need to talk," she said quietly. I crossed my arms, leaning against the kitchen counter. "About what?" "Toby," she said, her voice cracking. "I know I messed up, Alex, but he needs both of us." "I agree," I said. "Which is why I'm filing for full custody. You'll still have visitation." Her face crumpled. "You can't do that. He's my son, too." "And I'm his father," I shot back. "The one who's been here, taking care of him while you were off with Eric." She flinched at his name. "Alex, I'm sorry. I made a mistake, but I'm still his mother. He needs me." "Does he?" I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "Because for the past year, you've been more focused on Eric than on your own family." Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. The truth hung between us like a blade, cutting through any pretense of reconciliation. The conversation ended there, with Emma retreating to her room once again. I stayed up late that night, poring over financial documents and crafting a detailed timeline of her absences. If this was going to court, I would be ready. The breaking point came on Friday. Toby was at school, and Emma had left early for a meeting. I knew better than to believe her. A quick check of the tracking app I'd installed on her phone confirmed she was in the city, nowhere near her supposed office. I decided it was time to confront her once and for all. I called the private investigator, who had been keeping tabs on her since the initial discovery. "Do you have her location?" I asked. "She's at a cafe downtown," he replied. "With Eric." My blood boiled, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I need pictures," I said. "Clear, undeniable proof." He assured me he'd take care of it, and I hung up, my hands trembling. This wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about making sure Emma couldn't manipulate the narrative. When she returned home that evening, she looked startled to find me waiting in the living room. "How was your meeting?" I asked, my voice icy. She hesitated, glancing at her bag as though it held some excuse. "Fine," she said. "Just a routine check-in." I stood and handed her an envelope. "Is that what you'd call this?" She opened it, her face blanching as she pulled out the photographs. There she was, sitting across from Eric at the cafe, their hands entwined like lovesick teenagers. "You had me followed?" she asked, her voice rising. "What choice did I have?" I said. "You've been lying to me for months. Did you really think I'd just sit back and take it?" Her hands shook as she shoved the photos back into the envelope. "You're trying to ruin me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "No, Emma," I said, my voice steady. "You did that all on your own." She sank into the armchair, sobbing into her hands. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I thought of Toby and the life he deserved, a life free from deception and instability. The next morning, I filed the papers. Emma would be served within the week, and the custody battle would begin. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to fight for my son, for my dignity, and for a future where I could finally breathe again. The first shots had been fired, and there was no turning back. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and the tension was palpable. I sat on the cold, hard bench outside the courtroom, clutching a folder of documents. My lawyer gave me a reassuring nod, but I could barely hear her words over the roar of my own thoughts. This was it, the moment everything would be decided. Emma arrived late, her hair disheveled, her eyes rimmed red. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, like a woman unraveling thread by thread. I almost felt sorry for her, but then I remembered what had brought us here. I steeled myself. I couldn't afford to lose focus. Inside the courtroom, the battle played out just as I had expected. My lawyer presented the evidence with precision, the affair, the neglect, the financial discrepancies. Emma's lawyer countered, painting her as a remorseful mother who had made a mistake but loved her son dearly. When Emma took the stand, she sobbed as she spoke about Toby, promising to do better, pleading with the judge not to take him away. And then it was my turn. I spoke from the heart about my love for Toby, about my commitment to giving him a stable, nurturing home. I emphasized how I had been the constant in his life while Emma was chasing something, or someone, else. I felt confident, even as Emma wept silently at her table. After hours of arguments, the judge finally announced that he would render his decision the following week. The room emptied slowly, the tension lingering in the air like a fog. I left without speaking to Emma. That night, as I tucked Toby into bed, he looked up at me with those big, trusting eyes. "Daddy, when's Mommy coming back?" "She'll see you soon, buddy," I said, brushing his hair from his forehead. "I promise." He nodded, satisfied, and turned over, clutching his stuffed dinosaur tightly. I stood there for a long time, watching him breathe, wondering how to shield him from the storm that was coming. The next morning, I received a call that shattered my world. It was Emma's sister, her voice trembling with panic. "Alex," she said, her words rushing out in a torrent. "Emma's gone. She left a note, something about not being able to face losing Toby. They found her car by the river." My knees buckled, and I collapsed into the nearest chair. "What do you mean, gone?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "They're searching for her," she said. "But it doesn't look good." The words hit me like a freight train. I dropped the phone, the world spinning around me. Emma was gone. Toby's mother, the woman I had loved, the woman I had fought so hard against, was gone. The days that followed were a blur of police updates, tearful calls from family, and a hollow ache in my chest that refused to go away. They found her body 2 days later, downstream from where her car had been abandoned. The autopsy confirmed what everyone had feared: Emma had taken her own life. I sat in the living room that night, staring at the wall, the weight of everything crushing me. I had fought so hard to protect Toby, to build a future for us, but now that future felt emptier than ever. I thought about Emma's final moments, her despair, her loneliness, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had been too harsh, too unforgiving. Had I pushed her to this? Was I partly to blame? Toby's small voice broke through my thoughts. "Daddy, where's Mommy?" I turned to see him standing in the doorway, his dinosaur tucked under one arm. He looked so small, so fragile, and my heart broke all over again. "Mommy had to go away," I said, my voice cracking. "But she loved you very much." "Is she coming back?" he asked, his eyes wide and innocent. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "No, buddy. She's not." He climbed into my lap, resting his head against my chest. "I miss her." "I miss her too," I whispered, holding him tightly. "I miss her too." The custody battle was over before it began. The judge awarded me full custody of Toby, but it felt like a hollow victory. Emma's absence loomed over everything, a constant reminder of how broken things had become. I tried to be strong for Toby, to give him the love and stability he needed, but some nights, after he had fallen asleep, I sat alone in the dark, consumed by what-ifs and regrets. Life went on, as it always does. Toby grew older, and the questions about his mother became less frequent, though no less painful. I did my best to keep her memory alive for him, sharing the good times, the happy moments, so he would know she wasn't defined by her mistakes. But in the quiet moments, when the house was still and the world felt far away, I thought about Emma, the woman I had loved, the woman I had lost, and the fragile, unpredictable nature of life. And I wondered if any of us had truly won.